So yes, today my name is Merethe Stave. Sometimes I introduce myself as that. And today I will share with you some thoughts and my experience when it comes to empower people and the company with Microsoft Learning Pathway and Microsoft Viva. So let's just rock and roll and move on here. So the other day I spoke with a customer, and yeah, I do speak with my customers, and occasionally I listen to. So let's see, what were their concern. And we were in this meeting, and of course that was via Teams, because these customers, they got now used to running their meetings in Teams, as most of us are getting. And one thing he said, that now we are having many more meetings, and especially with people in other locations. And I think we will continue with that even when we get back to our offices. And we have a challenge, though. We are working in an open landscape, and we don't have many meeting rooms, and not that many that are set up for online meetings. So that was his concern. And what will happen when we get back to our offices? Is this what will meet us? Maybe some of us are used to working in closed offices. Maybe some of us are used to work in open landscape. And me, for the last 10, 12, 15 years, I've been working mostly in open landscapes. And I like that. I really do. Right now, I'm working for Cloudways. Now we actually only have office in the cloud. So the only time I actually is in an office will be when we are getting back to be able going to offices for customers. But in any case, are we preparing our company location and offices to when people are coming back and they have actually changed the way they are running meetings, or even they have more meetings maybe across business units and maybe across a location, as my example of my customer is doing? Because before they used to meet in the office and they were discussing across the desk or visiting each other's offices in the same location. And then it may be easy to forget that even if you have your company different places in the world, or maybe even different places in the country, we all work in our little groups in our respective locations. As we have now changed by having online meetings, we have actually maybe toned down some of these silos, and we're actually working more across locations, and we want to continue with that. But if our offices are not ready for it, we will get a lot of noise. So what are we going to do about that? And also, what about one thing, as we have now learned to run our meetings in Teams or in online, one way or the other. But what about the rest? What do we need to think about when we now are getting ready perhaps to go back to our offices? Or maybe you're going to work in a hybrid solution. Are we going to let everyone continue to work in their home offices if they want to? Or how are we going to do that? I think a lot of us are maybe thinking about this, or should we prepare? And I'm mixed up a few pointers that I think we should think about. For instance, information management. What do I mean by that? For instance, where should we store and share stuff digitally? Perhaps we are actually quite used to storing paper folders, physical paper folders in our office. But as we are now working digitally, if we haven't stopped doing that, at least we have to start storing and sharing documents and other content digitally. So which tools are we going to use? And how are we going to work when we're going back or going hybrid? And how are we going to balance that? So what about our digital workspaces? What are they? And what about our physical workspaces? Or should we maybe revamp our offices? Should we make more meeting rooms for collaborative groups, etc.? So what are we going to do? And what about digital literacy? Many of us, maybe we used to work in office tools, perhaps like Word and PowerPoint and Excel, and we just assume that everybody knows the same as we do. But people maybe have been using other kinds of tools. So maybe they need to learn everything from scratch. So where are we on a scale from 1 to 10 on the different kinds of areas within digital literacy? Do we know? What do you want to do about it? And then who owns actually the digital competency journey in our company? or in our organization? Is it IT? Is it HR? Who? And then if we are now creating new digital workspaces, who knows how to structure them and who should manage? And do we have people who knows how to manage those digital workspaces? And who decides how they should be structured? Who decide how our teams for projects should look like? What kind of channels should we have? Who decides or knows how to structure how our department teams, for instance, should be structured? And do we have enough meeting rooms to cater for this increased online meeting activity? Do we maybe also need to add some more meeting room equipment to have these online meetings? And who decides how to structure our physical workspaces? Because these days we are talking a lot about teams and working online, but have we actually talked with real estate? Are they preparing any changes to when people are coming back to work in the physical space? And then what about security? Because when we worked in our office, we had full overview perhaps on where we had the different things, and we had our own servers. As we're now moving out over to the cloud and move our content, okay, what should be in the physical workspaces? Do we need to change anything there? And what about the digital tools? How do we manage access permissions and these kinds of things? And how can we decide when do we share things with external resources and when do we store and share things only internally? And how can we manage all of this? So this is kind of the jungle I see. We are all meeting more or less. I guess you recognize yourself. And in the middle of this, we have the beating heart, our people. And how are they doing? Are they comfortable? Do they know where to find stuff? Do they know where to put stuff? And are they comfortable using these new digital tools? So there's a lot of things that we need to consider and think about when we're going back to the office. So there's a lot of questions. However, we don't need to eat the full elephant in one go. We can divide it up and we can start one piece at a time. And we don't have to do it alone. And we can do it together. We can join forces and we can help each other out. And one interesting, I do love statistics. And then, of course, numbers can tell you different things and all depending on how you interpret those numbers. And there was this research done where they found that 79% of CEOs worldwide are concerned that the lack of essential skills in the workforce is a barrier to future growth. All right, we buy that. And what they also figured out is that employees mostly had just 1% of the work week to focus on learning new skills. So what does this mean for us? And we all agree that it is a good idea to increase our digital competency or our digital literacy. So why don't we still give more time to our employees to learn new digital skills? Do we expect people to do that in their spare time? Or do we just think that if they just hang around and do their job, they just magically just absorb good ways of working digitally? I'm not quite sure why we don't give more time for our staff or our employees to actually learn new digital tools. And still, yes, on-the-job learning is still one of the best ways to learn. And in addition to that, you would also need some more organized and ad hoc training and learning. And just as an example, if I was a carpenter and I get a hammer and a screwdriver, I might figure out how to use them and when to use what. However, if I'm working with a more experienced carpenter, I can learn some skills to help me then build houses better and at least use a little less time on learning how to build a good house. And the same goes for digital tools, because it's not always intuitive to know how to use these tools. And I also want to dive a little bit more into the digital literacy. And many of us, we are used to working with office tools and we take some of that knowledge for granted, as I mentioned. And now as more of the workforce is moving into the digital platform, they might have used other systems, other tools. And now, for instance, they have to start getting used to Teams. They have to start getting used to desktop or laptop. And they might not even know where to find the start button. It is true. Or even they might not understand that you can find your apps via the start button. There are some basic knowledge that not everybody knows. I think it's really important as we're moving forward in this new digital world that we are making training material and we prepare for the learning journey, that we remember this. And it won't work if I start building a wall if the foundation is not there. And the same goes for digital training. If I start on a level where I just assume everybody knows step 1 to 5, and I start with number 6, and if they don't know 1 to 5, then they will not be able to grasp it, or it will take a longer time. And then, of course, you have those on the far other end who already knows all of the things. You should cater the training to all these different levels. And then what we can do is to make sure that we, for instance, map where are we on this digital literacy journey by using surveys. You have statistics, and there are other means to map the employee digital competency. All right, and at the end of this presentation, I've shared some links with you, for instance, to the EU Digital Competency Framework, which have 5 points where you can see where are you in those 5 points. So that can be a good place to start. In addition to, of course, the champion and training material that we now get from Microsoft, which is quite a lot. So what is the power in your company? Is it this gang or another gang? In any case, your people, they are your power. So what we need to do is empower the people. All right. So let's go. How do we do that? Where do we begin? Because it's a big elephant, right? So what is the first piece? Well, one of this is to first and foremost invest and involve your people. And what I would really start with, even before, maybe you already have implemented Microsoft 365, the technical part of it. Maybe you started with some e-learning, which is nice, but it will not give you the lift that you would need. It's not enough. So what I would do then is to invest in a champion network. And what do we mean by a champion network? That means you get 2 or 3 or 200, all depending on the size of your company, people who burn and have a passion for technology and who really loves to share. And what is important is that those that are part of the champion network, they get 10% of the work dedicated for, number one, to learn the tools and how to work with these tools. That's number one. And then as this is an ongoing journey, they will also need to continue learning. Pay attention. What are the new updates from Microsoft? When is webinar coming to Teams, for instance, Teams meetings? All of these things they need to pay attention to, as well as to understand their business and understand how they can help their business. So at least they would need 10% of the time. And what I've seen so many times, you have engaged and enthusiastic people, and they won't mind using their free time to both learn and to investigate how they can help their colleagues and how they can help their company. But it will only last that much. Because eventually, if they don't get that time enough to sit down and read and see a video or attend a conference, they will burn out. And then you sit left with nothing. So the champion network is a key that you need to make sure that your new digital world is working. And of course, those that are champions, they should have a specific training program specifically for them. And then when they are getting the skills and the knowledge that they need to stand on their own, then they will start training the rest of the organization. And of course, collaborate across units. Many times I see that people start having some champions from the IT department, which is fine. And also the IT department themselves need a champion or two. However, who understands business the most? The business itself. So I would recommend to get the champions from the business. and they collaborate with IT. And who should own the digital journey these champions are going on? That could perhaps be HR, who is responsible for the general knowledge and management in the company. So then you have IT and communications to see what are the stories we need to tell, what are the scenarios, how can we communicate this in a good way that resonates with the company or with the organization. Maybe there are other initiatives going on that we can combine the training of the champions with another initiative, for instance, security awareness campaigns, and we can combine this into how to learn these new tools and focusing on what people need to do. All right, so then you can have a collaboration across units, because then you do it together. All right, next step, also build a space for what I call the power production, because as you are empowering your people, you're actually doing power production. And walk the talk yourself. Create a team specifically for the champions, create another teams where you share and where the rest of the organization can then ask questions and get advices, etc. Then you have a two-way dialogue. Or in Yammer, if it's a big company, then Yammer could be the community space where the champions share their good practice, and then people can ask questions and get advice. And add, for instance, a Microsoft Learning portal for all kinds of learning in your company. And then when you add Viva Learning, or actually the full Viva stack, which is really cool, but then add the Viva Learning to the learning portal, and of course it will show up in Teams, then you have a good space for your power production, right? All right. Oops, wrong way. Next step, and of course, as the champions are ready, you got the spaces ready, then of course you onboard the rest of the organization. You build a story, you show them the low-hanging fruits, how they can work better. Because the whole point of implementing Microsoft 365 and on top of that, the Viva environment is to empower people and give them good tools and good ways of working. So onboard them, show them how to do things, and then have the learning portal updated regularly, have webinars, learning activities, and not the least, improve processes, because that is what it is also much about. All right, and what is important to know is that this is an ongoing journey. It's not that after number 3 you're kind of done and you can go on and do the rest of your work. This is a journey, and it will go on as long as you're working. And it is a maturity journey. So as the organization grows and the maturity and the skill sets, both for the end users and the company grows, you will see new possibilities. And of course, at the same time, Microsoft is also developing based on the feedback that you give and other companies are giving and other users are giving. So it's a collaborative effect, actually, where people are working together. All right, and you will grow and you will see new possibilities, and then the company will grow basically and give you more business. So how do we do that? First of all, don't wait for something to happen, or somebody else is going to do something. I would recommend take charge of the situation. If you are a leader, discuss with your leader board, or if there's a limit to your mandate to what you can do, at least you can make sure you prepare for your own employees when they return, or even before that. Communicate with them, see what they need, and there's a lot you can do. So first of all, take charge. So let's have a look at these little points I made up here. Define the ownership. So many times I go and visit a customer and we look at what we need to do, and then I ask, yeah, but who owns this? Who is the owner of your digital literacy? Who owns the solutions you want to build? And it's not always really clear who actually owns them. Perhaps it's an initiative coming from the IT, or maybe the business have decided this initiative, and then it's not quite clear where it actually belongs. What I usually do with my customers then is to actually sit down and write up a Rocky matrix. And it can be quite extensive if you take all the activities and tasks we have to do to make sure that the Microsoft 365 and the learning and everything is working. But what you can do is to have a look at the different units that now are going to work together. For instance, who are responsible for information management if you have that in your organization, and who is then responsible for information technology, human resources, communication, business, and you can divide into the different groups involved one way or the other in this collaborative solution. And then you can look at, for instance, information governance or data governance. What are the responsibilities and accountabilities when it comes to that? And what about the digital toolbox? And within these units, who is responsible and accountable for the respective areas? And who is responsible or accountable for which kind of activities when it comes to digital literacy? Because maybe somebody, human resources, are accountable, which means they are the main responsible. But then you have, for instance, somebody in business who are responsible to make sure that their employees are going to these trainings, for instance. And even though Rocky is a lot, you have responsible, accountable, consulting, and informed, you don't have to take all of those four. What I found is that if you have an exercise with gathering people from these different units and then focus on responsible and accountable, all of a sudden you see that they get some aha experience. They see, but we don't have that role in our company. So that makes, okay, but who is then responsible to do it? Who is the owner? And then you have to place that somewhere before you can move further. And it can be quite this interesting discussion, but take it on a high level so you don't use many days, because it takes some time to actually go through this one. All right. Always interesting to go through that one. And then what about information and data governance? Because you have a lot of activities, if this is in a project or if it's in a department or if it's a community or whatever situation it is, you have a lot of messages going on, emails, pictures, videos, etc. And there are some diamonds in here you also want to take care of. So what is important when we are looking at this whole empowerment and digital collaboration? We need to also look at the life cycle of the content and information. This keeping a holistic approach on the whole employee experience by combining these elements. Then also, for instance, with Microsoft Learning Pathway and Microsoft Viva Learning, then you can give your employees tools and the skills. And not the least, also you build a culture of resilience and collaboration when they know where to find the right information. All right, and also to just map out where, for instance, if you're now moving from the file server structure into, for instance, working in teams, then many times you kind of forget that it's not the same thing. It's like moving from one house to another. You invest in a new building, you invest in maybe an interior architect putting up a nice, pretty living room, a nice, pretty kitchen. And then what you do with the old stuff? Do you just move it over and make a mess of everything? Or do you actually maybe get rid of something and put things in a place where they should live and live further on? So that is quite important to make an overview of where information should go and help your employees to see where do they put their stuff. Where do I, for instance, the project documentation, that should I live in the project teams or should it go somewhere else in IT perhaps, because that's where it's going to live after the project. It's always important to make sure that you got a full overview of your information and data governance and communicate this to your employees. All right. And then you need to define some goals and targets and not the least measure. Because what is it you're trying to achieve when you have these new solutions? And what we are making business. We are building a harbor, or we are selling fish, or we are building houses, or making roads. Whatever we're doing, we should do also the same thing when our digital journey, and define some goals and targets and find ways to measure. And the nice thing, the good news is that you have a lot of cool tools already in Microsoft 365. You have these three on the left there, your productivity score, compliance score, and secure score. They are really good because they give you all the statistics in the back to see where are you. It doesn't mean that you need to have 100% score on all of these. It just will help you to define, to see where you are, and you can then yourself decide what do you want to change. And also, in addition to that, use surveys, asking your employees how are they working, how are they communicating, how are they learning, do I know where to find A, B, and C, do I know who to ask for help? These things are quite important. And make the digital learning part of the employee development. For instance, measure the champions. How much we say that they should use 10% of their work hours to work with being a champion. So what does that mean? It means, for instance, that they're helping their organization to improve processes, to run training for their colleagues. But then you should measure it. Then you should have some goals. Okay, Peter, you're going to be a champion for my department. Okay, what is the plan for the next 3 months? What do you want to do? Or Peter and Jane and Jonas, maybe all three of you are champions. What is the plan? And then after 3 months, you should actually sit down and say, okay, what did you do? What is the effect? Because that way you also empower people by giving them the responsibility. And for the end user, you should also measure their digital training. One thing is that you maybe have mapped the digital literacy, but then what? You need to do something about it. For instance, you have some mandatory training, and then you can also measure by asking them what new have they learned. And also, if you're a manager, share with your employees what you have learned. And you don't have to write a big article about it. Just share it in a conversation in Teams. Say, wow, my team, I learned how to create a new channel, or whatever you learned. Then share that. Because as a manager, if you show that you're also on this journey, then it makes it easier for your employees to follow. Yeah. So together with the surveys, and then you define what are the learning targets and you measure them. And you keep measuring every half a year, for instance, then you can see the change. And then you might want to change some of the communications, or maybe you want to have, if you see there are some issues, then you maybe want to ramp up some of the training. So always listen to your people, what they need, and then bring the facts on the table and build your training based on that. All right. So what do you think these numbers are about? What they say in these investigations here is that organizations with highly engaged employees, they have about 20% greater profitability. Tricky word. That's quite a bit. It doesn't surprise, does it? And 94 of employees, they say they will stay at the company longer if it invested in their learning and development, which is quite a given. And we do like to stay where we feel we're taken care of, and my employer actually want me to grow and succeed. And to do that, I need to get the good skills and the good competency. And it's all about the orange. And what do I mean by that? Did you hear the story about the orange? There were two people, they were fighting about this orange. And then some bright head said, well, why don't you just divide it in two? Then you can share your orange. But they refused. No, that would not work. And then the fight went on and on and on, and both of them wanted this one full orange. And then another bright head said, but yes, why do you want this orange? And then it turned out one of them wanted the skin, and then the other one wanted the meaty juice, the juicy meat inside. And by that, when removing carefully the skin, and they got the full skin and the full juicy meat, then they both were happy. And many times, if you correlate these to our digital workplace, when I see there are initiatives for implementing Microsoft 365 or Office 365, it comes either from IT or the business, and there might be a need for it. It's a good idea, and I know nobody refuses that. But for some reason, it has been decided. And then they deliver and they implement the technical solution, and people are not using it, or they don't see the benefit of using it, or they might use it as a glorified file share. So why even move from file share if it's just going to continue with the same kind of structure and work in the same way as you have before? Then you haven't achieved anything, or perhaps even you might have achieved some fuss and noise in the organization because things are not quite working as people expect it to do, because you work with a new tool in an old way. So IT and business, they had the idea to implement Microsoft 365, but it takes a little bit more to succeed than just implement the technical solution. You also need to learn how to run meetings, but you can still pretty much Google that. So it's not about either using the tools, because you can find out quite a lot. And what really brings success is when employees are using the toolbox as a natural part of their work day and using it right, and combining the different apps. For instance, using Teams and OneNote and Planner when you're having a meeting. And as a result of the training and communicating that new strategy, because you should have that when you implement the Microsoft 365, a new culture of sharing and collaboration emerges. And this requires people, and it requires effort, and it requires collaboration across business areas and business units and a different area, sorry. As an example, the IT can produce guidelines and training material, and then they need to reach the audience. And then HR, they might be responsible for the digital training of the employees. And they have, or maybe the communication department has created a learning portal, and the need for a learning portal content and a plan for which order should be shared. So they have different needs, but if you combine the different needs from IT, HR, and communication, the IT comes with the guidelines and the guides, and HR, the communication, they come with a platform where to share it. So then you're supporting each other and you share what you have respectively. So that way everybody is happy and they don't have to create their own solution for everything, each of them. But you can combine it and you have a really much better solution. So it's all about the orange. I forgot to do the animation here. All right, so all of these together are working and supporting the people in the middle. However, there are a few things we sometimes forget. For instance, real estate, as I mentioned initially in this session, are we preparing also the physical workspace? That's one thing. And when we implement Microsoft 365 or other digital tools, what sometimes happens is that we forget IT support. IT implement it, or business, whoever decides to implement Microsoft 365 or any other initiative, they go ahead and implement it. And then when users start to get issue, they contact IT support, and they haven't been informed of all these new initiatives. So what is really important when you are preparing for a new initiative in your organization? Bring IT support in from the beginning, and bring in real estate, because they might have some important feedback and information. For instance, just implementing meeting rooms with Teams meeting rooms, then you need some special equipment and other things you need to consider. As well as security, because you need to make sure that your employees work in a safe and secure way. And also to keep track of how should we do permissions, when should we share with external and not, etc. So this whole constellation of units need to work together, because then you really get a good solution. All right. Oops, hold on, I went a bit fast. And there are some key elements to really give a great employee experience, is building up towards the Viva. And well-being. I guess a few of us, we have started using these analytics, my analytics, that you get an email and see how we're working, and do we get enough focus time. And what I found is, I don't need to always follow all of them, but I've found by looking at them, I get more aware of, all right, I need to make sure I put on some focus time in my calendar where I actually don't have a meeting, but I have a meeting with myself to actually focus and learn maybe a new tool. And also just the fact to learn how to turn off notifications, because we get notification from all over the place, but I don't need to get a notification about a notification in Teams in my email, because I go to Teams in the morning. Then I find whatever I need to find there. I don't need to get a message in Outlook to see that I got a message in Teams, right? So it's kind of doesn't make sense. So turn off the notifications you don't need. That is the well-being, and you also well-being is about being safe at work and you feel as a respected part of your team. And I see my time is running off, but I will share with you this presentation afterwards so you'll see it. And empowerment, by giving people the tools, we give them the skills to be prepared for tomorrow. And being connected, it means that you work together, you share. It's not that I have to complete my document before I can share with somebody else. I start directly in Teams, start with the document, share with my colleagues, and we work together. For instance, using co-authoring. And the growth, when you give people skills and you give people the tools they need, they will grow. And as people are growing, your company is growing. All right, and purpose. Because if you're working as a team and you share with your employees your common goals, you are working for something bigger than yourself. Especially when you become a champion, for instance, then you're helping your company and you're helping your employees to achieve whatever they want to achieve. And of course, by learning these new tools and learning how to manage, you also get the focus and you know how to prioritize. When you're using, for instance, Planner, and you're using these other tools, you know what needs to be done and where to improve things. And I think I got them all now. Yeah. All right. So let's move on. Fast and furious. Microsoft Viva. It's really much more than just a pretty face, because I've been investigating a bit and I really love what's coming out of Microsoft Viva. It's a new overall collaborate environment, as Jeff Teeper said this morning in the keynote. And the connections will bring you news and updates and connect basically everything. And the insight is similarly, as we have talked about in my analytics, you will now, as a manager, for instance, see the overall analytics about productivity and well-being. Because it's also about manager being skilled and empowered to take care of their employees. By saying, okay, we have a lot of work to do. We need to help our employees to get more focus time, to learn new skills, etc. It's quite interesting. And I think it's going to empower both companies and people. And topics, as a SharePointer for a long time and metadata enthusiast, I really love topics. And it's a lot more than metadata. You can create pages with terms, with information, and it's a graph in the back that will bring that together. It's really beautiful. And learning, we're going to have a little extra big look at learning now today. Because it's about skilling and growth. Give people skills and they can do amazing things. And the beautiful part of this Viva Learning is that it comes right into your Teams. You'll find it as an icon on the left side menu when it's ready. Then you can find it there, and it'll bring you training and learning that, for instance, the manager might have assigned a specific learning material to you, or you have assigned it yourself. And then you keep scrolling down. When you get this, you will find then company learning, and you will find perhaps LinkedIn learning and other kinds of, if you have LMS, you will also bring that into the same place. And if you then already have, for instance, created a Microsoft Learning Pathway portal, when you create a new one, it will look like this. And I always usually change it immediately because I put aside these things. They're very good, but I want to focus on what people want to do. For instance, how to get started, and then how to get started with meetings, how to get started with these different kinds of tools. And also used when I was creating or revamping the Microsoft Learning Pathway, site, I also use the MoCA, Microsoft Modern Collaboration Architecture, to help to look at, okay, what do I as an individual need to do, and which tool should I use when I'm working on my own? And when we look at team productivity, what kind of tools are we going to use when we're working together? And then as a community productivity, what are the tools I would work on in that context? So context is very important. But then and what Microsoft Learning Pathways is bringing you is lots of cool and great playlists for the different topics. For instance, if I create a page here for meetings, then I can create, this is how we run meetings in our company. And then I can add some videos and some playlists from OneNote and Planner and Teams in a context of meetings, and etc. for other things. So then, and the beauty is that when you are setting up Microsoft Learning Pathway with the playlist, you can call it like a Spotify for Microsoft Learning, and you can pick and choose and put them together based on the context. And then the beauty part is that this will come into your Teams as learning items. So it's all coming together. All right, so I think my time is up. Yeah, here we go. So I had some link here in the end, and I say thank you for joining the session. And it's been quiet. So I don't know if there's been any questions or what.
No, thank you very much for a great session there. Brilliant stuff. We haven't had any questions as of yet in the chat. If anyone does have any questions, now's your time to get them posted. Or if you do want to ask in person, then please raise your hand by clicking on the little smiley face with the hand to raise your hand, and I can take you off mute to ask your question. Just while we're waiting, then I can see some emojis then,
yeah, just here, write the session. I've got that.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got the feedback form there in the chat as well. So please do post your feedback. I just want to say, brilliant session, really good insightfulness there. And I love the stats around, I'm one for stats, love the stats around what CEOs are saying and then what percentage people actually get to do that in their working week. And it's so true. Working with lots of different organizations, they always say, well, why aren't people using X, Y, and Z? It's like, well, have you given time for training? Have they got time for learning? What's your comms been around it? And that's the key part for me in any sort of deployment or adoption piece.
That is so true, and that's why I find it so interesting. And we all agree that's how it is. Then what does it take to actually bridge that gap? So let's try. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me, and good luck with the rest of the day.
Cheers. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day too.